Welcome to Corporate Therapy, the podcast where we unpack the dumb shit that businesses do. We ask the big, juicy questions like why, what were they thinking, and then we chase down the answers. Today, we're going to be exploring measurement madness and why business KPIs are creating toxic behavior. I'm Matt, a business designer, which is a fancy way of saying I'm a corporate plumber fixing the crap that businesses do.
And I'm Rob. I'm a bit of a fossil in the people and culture space. I've been working with people for ages now.
Awesome. So this is going to be a fun session, Rob. We're going to really be able to unpack some of those war stories that we've both been through when it comes to KPIs and measurement. What I'd love to get kicked off, though, is why is it that you think management or folks are so hung up with measurement in business? What's behind that?
How far back would you like me to go? I mean, if we start 150,000 years ago, humans are just pattern recognition machines on legs. That's what we do, and that used to be really key to our survival. Unfortunately, once we got into business, we decided to just keep that pattern recognition machine firing as much as we could, and we got into the idea that if we can see a pattern, we can manipulate it in some way where we can increase performance or reduce nasty things happening or manipulate that in some way. So, I mean, to me, it goes all the way back to something that used to be an evolutionary advantage, but weirdly enough, I think is killing us off in business now.
Can we probe a little bit deeper? So you talked about pattern recognition in business. What do you mean by that, Rob?
So what I mean is that people are more interested, and particularly leaders seem to be more interested in the pattern itself than what the pattern tells them. So what I mean by that is, maybe it's best to illustrate this with a little story.
Brilliant.
I have a bit of experience with training call center reps. I used to train folks that worked in call centers. And I had a good relationship with the call center manager in one of the call centers that I trained people for. And what I noticed was, as I finished up a 2 or 3 week training program with these reps to prep them for the horrific job it is to be on the phones, I noticed they got really anxious, and I was trying to work out where that anxiety came from. And it came from the call board, which in my day used to be LEDs. Now is far fancier than that, lovely screens and what have you. But it showed things like average handle time and first call resolution rate and average wait time, how many people were in the queue, all of this sort of stuff. And the poor call center reps would look up at that board and see that there were 130 people in the queue and go, oh no, the next person who calls is going to be really angry because the average wait time is now 26 minutes and they're going to be really freaked out. And they would settle in for an angry call. And it almost became a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I asked the call center manager, I'm like, why do we have that board? And he was like, well, it's important that the reps know these stats. And I'm like, is it though? Because it seems like it's just making them anxious. Now, at the time, we'd embarked on what was a very early call quality program, where we had a system that we used to measure, and this was measured manually by people listening to calls and ticking boxes and moving sliders and what have you. This is, long before the days of artificial intelligence. We had started off on this call quality thing, and I said to the call center manager, I said, let's do a little experiment here. Let's turn off the call board. And I could see him start to get nervous at that point because his beloved patterns were in danger. And I said, let's turn off the call board and let's ask the reps to focus on nothing but the quality of their call with the customer for a month, see how it goes. Yeah. We went and got the COO's permission to do it, turned the call board off, started to measure quality, and watched every single metric go in the right direction. We watched average handle time go down. We watched first call resolution rate go up. We watched the call quality increase naturally enough. But basically what I was trying to get to was there were patterns there that we were trying to manipulate, but nobody really got the why of it all. Why are we trying to do this? Well, we're trying to do this because we want the customer's interaction with the call center to be as awesome as it can be. You can only get average handle time down if you listen to a customer. You can only get first call resolution rate up if you listen to a customer. When you have people focused on an average handle time, all they're interested in doing is getting people off the phone as quick as possible. You get them focused on quality, it happens naturally. So I think that to me is the issue, is we get focused on the pattern rather than the why behind the pattern.
Yeah. What was going through you? Said your leader. So you shifted from the staff member being freaking out to the leader freaking out. What was behind them freaking out? What was their concern?
Honestly, I think the concern that they had, Matt, was my beloved numbers are going away. The things that I tweak to show myself as a good call center manager are going away. If I'm just trusting all of these reps to work on quality for a week, and I'm not managing the numbers, well, there's a problem. Now, we very quickly got around that by saying those numbers are still there. You can still look at them. I just don't want the reps looking at them and that making them anxious.
Because I'm kind of curious when I think about the leadership and the obsession with numbers that comes through. And I wonder, like, when do you start to learn some of those colorful or bad behaviors that are going as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder about this too. I think it falls into the old, that old little phrase, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. I think that's something that a lot of people learn, often from one of their leaders early in their career. And we just take it as a truism and run with it. And quite frankly, it's bullshit. There's lots of things that you can manage that you can't measure.
I feel for you on that one, because I got taught that exact phrase, Peter Drucker's phrase, very early on in my career. And I started out as an analyst, right? So I love spreadsheets. I love the numbers. Numbers were my friend at that point. And having two bosses that were both bean counters meant a very, very black and white view of how things should actually be done. And I made some horrific decisions early on in my career, all based on KPIs and running things that were black and white. And when I led teams or led people, it was very much, let's run it by the numbers. What do they tell us? And if I didn't have the stats, I didn't have that. So I can appreciate your story's example of how anxious that individual could actually feel and get. But it took me bloody years to kind of cotton on. So I was not obviously as fast as you there, Rob. That pattern of the numbers only gets you so far. In fact, it can actually get in your way sometimes. There's got to be something more into cluing in to what's going on here. And I think you talked about the why. I was missing the conversation around why, because a lot of the numbers don't actually give you that clue as to what the hell's really going on behind here. It doesn't help you really understand motivations that are happening into an organization. When it comes to though producing toxic behaviors, right? When it comes to really unhealthy, where do you see, have you got some stories or examples you've seen where people have actually focused on numbers so much that it's really hurt people?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen quite a few examples of this. I've seen a call center rep who's focused so much on average handle time that they're hanging up on a customer as soon as they hit their average handle time. Okay, that's it. Call us back if you've any more hassles. Glunk, gone. Not realizing that there are a couple of 10-second calls that will come through where somebody goes, "Hi, is this Pizza Hut?" And you go, "No, it's somebody else." And that averages it all out. It's an average handle time, not a drop dead time on every single call. Yeah. But probably a more toxic example, if you like, was there was an organization I was working with once who put a massive sales target on their sales team, huge sales target. And what happened? We subsequently, like they nailed it. They blew it out of the water, and we were like, "Wow, that's amazing!" Because that was a hell of a stretch target to begin with, and now the first quarter's in, and they've blown it out of the water. So we went looking for why, and what we found out was when they were selling one of these things to a customer, they would give them another one to give to their friend to spread the word, if you like, and they would count that as two sales. So they had found a creative way of doubling the numbers. and there was calling for blood in that organization at the time. There was a lot of folks in the sales team who were going to end up against the wall, until a person who was quite close to me went, hold on a second, we're going to give people a ridiculous target like this, and then we're going to complain when they achieve it through creative means. And we were all like, creative's a bit of a stretch there. I think this was actually malicious. But it was the fear of failure that drove the team to do that. It was a toxic behavior that was driven by a number.
What about fake numbers? Like, because that's kind of sparked where you kind of talked about, hey, they're making up. But one of my favorites is employee surveys or employee polls. Let's go from it. What's been your experience there, Rob?
I've got some experience with employee opinion surveys. I've seen the good and the bad of them. Like I said at the start, I'm a fossil in people and culture. So I remember people and culture before there were employee opinion surveys, when we didn't care. You got a paycheck and you were glad of it. But I think what's interesting about employee opinion surveys is that when they're done well, they're a signpost. You ask a number of questions, you get the data back, and you go, we need to dig into this. We need to dig into why this is a problem, or why this is a strength, or whatever it is. And you go and talk to people. It's a way to open the door really to a deeper conversation. You can still measure it. You can still measure employee NPS or something along those lines, and track your progress over time. But it's the conversations that get you to, here's what the real issue is, and here's how we might find a way out of it. The problem I see is that employee opinion surveys are happening so regularly now. There's some organizations doing them on a quarterly basis, and they themselves are causing frustration in the teams, where they're going, you know what? I gave you all the same answers last time and you did nothing with them then. So why would I bother giving them to you now? So employee opinion surveys, if done right, are a wonderful way of sparking a conversation about how we can amplify the strengths of an organization and fix its weaknesses. Whereas employee opinion surveys done wrong become a problem in themselves.
What have you seen though, when the numbers are shit, like when the employee opinions come back and it's, oh my God, this is diabolical? What behaviors have you seen that spark?
It's like my old pirate t-shirt. The beatings will continue until morale improves. but that's it. I've seen. I'm trying to come up with an example here without throwing anyone under the bus. But one of the things that we often ask for in employee opinion surveys, or we ask about in employee opinion surveys, is your ability to speak up if there's something wrong in an organization. And I've seen a speak up result be given to a chief executive officer, and seen that chief executive officer go, well, how dare they? How dare they tell us they can't speak up when we give them all of these forums where they can speak up, and where we give them all of these opportunities, and my door is always open. And I'm like, and just based on the reaction I've seen, I wouldn't tell you if I was having a bad day if you were the last person on earth. So there's a huge lack of self-awareness in some senior leaders that this is not a number that you can twist a dial and change. This is a number where you've got to have a real empathetic, authentic, logical interaction with one of your staff members in order to change that dial anyway. You've got to communicate with them.
Oh my God, we some of the communication stuff sounds scary, Rob. That sounds like soft stuff, though, not the hard stuff of numbers.
Yeah, and honestly, mate, to me, that's the key issue. Is these numbers should be driving a softer interaction, but we use them to try to manipulate something that is difficult to manipulate with pure numbers. I was raised a scientist, right? I studied a little bit of applied sciences and always had a fascination with it. So evidence is my thing. Yeah. But one of the things you'll notice is if you just lay the evidence on the table, there's usually somebody who's going to get really hurt by that. Yeah. You've got to use that as a way of starting the conversation, not ending it.
But that evidence can be pretty rough if the person who's setting the KPIs in the first place is the person in control, right? With no dialogue or interaction with the individual. This is how I see the world. Therefore, this is how I'm going to measure it. What's your take on that, on who should be setting these KPIs?
So in our previous podcast on middle management, I mentioned a CEO that I really admired, who said to his senior management team, your job is to get the roadblocks out of their way so they can run the business. Yeah.
Yeah.
Set the strategy, get the roadblocks out of the way, let them run the business. What also happened at that time was at around that time, we were putting together a sort of an online people management tool, which was unheard of at the time. That's how old I am. And we were going to do online performance reviews, which meant that we had to bring all of our paper forms into this new thing. And we decided this was a perfect opportunity to rewrite our objectives while we were doing it. So what the CEO did was set the strategy and said, here are the 5 or 6 big things that we have to hit during the year. And now it's up to you to decide how you're going to hit them. So that those 5 or 6 targets, goals, measures were cascaded down through the whole organization.
Yep.
But we got the opportunity to go, hey, how does what I do feed into that? You know? So, for example, one of the things that we noticed was a problem, and one of the things the CEO wanted to work on was employee turnover. Our employee turnover was too high. We didn't pay all that well. It was a fun place to work, but we didn't pay all that well, and often people ran off for a better offer.
Yep.
So everybody had a KPI in my team and in most other teams around reducing employee turnover. But how we did that was very different. So my boss, who was the HR director, she was looking at it at a very strategic level, whereas I was looking at it from the perspective of how can I make sure people are trained so that they know everything they need to do in order to do their job? How can I ensure that the leaders know how to coach them and do one-on-ones with them so that they're having a good employee relationship in that way? Some of my colleagues were about making better recruitment decisions and so on. So we all had that KPI, that measure, but the way that we hit it was very, very different. But the cool thing was, because we knew almost everybody had that KPI, even if you were a very small cog in a very giant machine, you understood your input into the achievement of that number. That was a big deal. That there was an understanding of here's why we're chasing that number. Yeah.
If you look at the types of involvement, though, that they have with teams, where you've talked about the setting of objectives or the setting of strategy in the targets, how often do you actually see that occur?
Oh, almost never. Like that was, I think I can count on the fingers of 2 fingers the amount of times that I've seen that happen. Yeah, it doesn't often happen. It's usually dictated from the top, or it's made up on the fly at the start of the performance year, and it's not looked at again until the end of the performance year, when we give people scores that average them out in the middle so we can get a nice clean bell curve in the organization. Sorry, I'm getting cynical again, but you get where I'm coming from. There's either these KPIs are set from on high, where the boss knows why they're really important, but the further down the organization hierarchy you get, the less connection you have to that, or they're just made up on the fly and they're not looked at again until it's time to give somebody a pay rise or a bonus at the end of the year. The important thing, like I said earlier, those numbers should open the door for a conversation. When I've seen this work well, leaders were having weekly one-on-ones with their teams where they would catch up with the person for a half hour or an hour and talk through their development. Yeah. Once a month, they would make that a slightly more formal chat where they'd go, if I was doing a performance review with you right now on these wonderful cascaded objectives, you'd be around here. So let me see if I can give you a bit of help to improve that one or to reduce this one or whatever it was. So you almost, by the time you got to your end of year performance review, you had 11 mini performance reviews already done, and you basically had to tag on the end of the month. Another reason that measurements are an issue in business is because people hate performance reviews.
Tell me about that, Rob.
Well, we love having numbers to guide the direction. Yeah. But we hate to have a performance review with people because we don't like conflict. We don't like to criticize folks, certainly not face to face in a room. That's terrifying. It might be easier over the phone or via email or whatever. But we don't want to do it face to face. So as with most things that we don't like to do, we procrastinate on it and avoid it until it's absolutely inevitable. And we panic and do their entire performance review from 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. When it's due to be delivered at 10 a.m. that morning.
Did you ever though see fabulous individuals, right, who just sucked at hitting the numbers that they were given or the targets, but actually were star employees? Did you ever see disconnects that were kind of coming in there?
Yeah, I did. I'm just trying to get my head around the best way of getting this across. There were a number of folks that I've met over time who almost rebelled against the numbers because the numbers were crappy, where they understood the why, even if the people that set those numbers didn't, and just rebelled against it and went, no, this is actually what's important. Yeah. So I've seen organizations where they'll nod and smile and they'll hate their performance review because they're held to account on numbers that they don't believe in. Yeah. They'll nod and smile to the numbers, and behind the scenes they're going, yeah, but we know what really matters. And that's interesting because those people are probably the saviors of your business. They're the ones, in a lot of cases, they're the ones who go, yeah, here's what really matters. And if only more organizations listen to them, they might get that through. But the problem is they're instantly branded as internal terrorists. They're trying to burn this place down from the inside because they won't abide by the numbers. But yeah, but your numbers are crap.
We could go in a couple of different directions here, Rob, based on what you're talking on. There's some great stuff that you go through. But what about when you've got metrics that are fantastic, like you've just delivered stellar results, right, in there? Have you seen it when individuals are going, well, actually, it was my team that did the real work, and it was my team that had those numbers, not really your team that's in there. You're trying to take credit for my work that's going there. Have you ever seen that by any chance, Rob?
Yeah, all the time. and again, this is we all enjoy being celebrated when things are going well, and we all hate being held to account when things are not. Yep. But again, the reason that happens, or at least the reason that I see it happening in businesses, is because the numbers are wrong. The numbers are vague. The numbers, it shouldn't. If you and I work in the same business and I do something awesome, you shouldn't be able to take credit for it, because the tasks that you complete to achieve that number will be very different to the tasks that I complete to achieve the same number. And we should be able to look at it. I have an experience with this myself where, same example, actually, we were tasked with reducing employee turnover by 5%. And I went into my beloved boss at my mid-year performance review, and I'd had a look at the numbers. We had a reduction of 15% going through. This was I think 2007, 2008. And I'm walking into my performance review, walking on air, expecting to have a golden crown put upon my head and a bunch of flowers and somebody to feed me grapes. I'm expecting wonderful things here. And I said to the boss, I'm like, I'm giving myself top marks here because we were aiming for 5 and I got 15. And she just smiled, raised her eyebrows a little and went, the equivalent of, oh, my sweet summer child, you poor little idiot. She said, what's going on in the grand scheme of things at the moment? And I was like, oh, the global financial crisis. And she's like, yeah. So nobody's quitting their jobs because it's really hard to get another one. Right. So you can try to claim the kudos for the global financial crisis if you like, but that's going to go bad. But one of the things that I thought was cool about that was she said, however, it would be unfair of me to hold you to 15% now, given 5% was your target. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold you to 5% for the first half of the year. This was my mid-year performance review. And I'll hold you to 15% for the second half of the year. And I was like, cool. It couldn't be fairer than that. And this is the one of the reasons that our love affair with numbers becomes poisonous when we get involved in performance reviews, is because there are surprises. There was a wonderful an organization called PeopleStream who helped us to put together this online performance review program that I was telling you about. And they introduced me to an objective writing methodology that they called VQTQ, which was verb, quantity, time frame, quality. And what was interesting was the quality measure was designed as almost like a constraint. Here's how you're going to know not only have you achieved this number, but you've achieved it in the right way. So, for example, in the example that I've been talking through, the verb was reduce. Yeah. The quantity was employee turnover by 5%. Yeah. The time frame, the T, was by the end of the financial year. And the quality measure was interesting, while maintaining current remuneration and benefits. So it would have been really easy for me to reduce the employee turnover by 5% if I gave everybody a 10% pay rise or gave them all access to a company Porsche. Yep. But the point was simply that I had to do it while maintaining, something else that was really important to us. Think about the sales team that I mentioned earlier, who sold one and gave one away for free and then counted it as 2. Imagine if they'd had a quality measure in place.
Yeah.
That was something about while not reducing average revenue per product or something like that. So with those objectives in mind, I wasn't surprised when I went into my performance review. My boss and I were expecting the same result from that most of the time. The global financial crisis was the only thing I tried to take credit for that I probably shouldn't have.
But you called it surprises, right? I'd call it context. Like, how do you design your business to operate in a context that's happening? And I see managers become aware that, hey, I can't just build things in a vacuum that's going through. And so they have this wonderful knee-jerk reaction. I'm going to measure everything. And that's where you start to see reports that look like a battleship's dashboard that's going up with, you got 8-point font and there's red lights going everywhere. And this is when I watch the leading, I'm so proud of this. This is fabulous. That's when I watch the analyst team going, am I ever going to see my family again? Because all I'm doing is building these bloody reports, right? But you watch staff go, which one of these am I meant to be going for? Like, which one of these matters here? Because there's just hundreds you put up there. And when you write strategies that have a whole crap load of objectives that you want to do because you're super excited, and then you have more projects in place that you want to deliver than you've got people in the company, and then you add KPIs onto that, staff just go, screw this. This is just overload. I'm just going to stick to what I've always been doing. And that's when you don't see any performance kick in the positive direction. If anything, you see it implode. What, in terms of your take, Rob, though, that would be around reporting and some of that. This is when they get it right, and this when it's Mother of Mary territory. So, what's been your experience on reporting?
To me, reporting works best when the numbers of metrics that we're reporting on are low.
Yeah,
and by low, I mean 4 to 6.
Yep.
That low. Nothing like what you were talking about where there's 400 different metrics that are all in 8-point font and the traffic light system there just makes it look like a blur of dots.
Yep.
You don't want something like that. If you look at this from a people and culture perspective, we used to say that you want ideally 4 objectives. Yeah.
Yep.
Maximum 6, but ideally 4. And if you think about it, most leaders in an organization should have some sort of a financial target they're chasing. Here's
Yep.
the big number we want on the balance sheet. Yeah. Some sort of a people number that they should be chasing as well, or a people KPI that they should be chasing. Something customer related. Imagine that. Yeah. And then finally one for the big hairy project that they're working on this year that they might not be working on next year,
Yep.
whatever that is, whether it's a transformation or a new product launch or something like that. But 4 covers it most of the time. Yeah. I
Yep.
see the same with senior management teams presenting to boards, or middle managers presenting to senior managers. They want 4 to 6. If you've got any more than that, they're doing their very best to keep their eyes open, but you can see the nods starting to happen. Or
Yep.
you can see them getting massively distracted by something else and wanting to it's a control thing. That's what it is. In the absence of control, we're going to measure everything we can, because that will at least give
Yep.
us the feeling that we have some control.
I'm just noticing my camera is slightly on an angle here, Rob. So if the audience is having to do this that's going through, this could be quite an exciting conversation. Sorry for the neck pains that's going in there, but we are talking about reporting, which is painful. So this is quite apt, I think.
And from a people perspective, when you lean your head to one side or another, it shows more that you're listening to the person. So there you go.
That's fabulous. For a double win. Because reporting for me, having started my career and being an analyst, has always been a love affair. When I started early, it was the ability to make something and felt very proud of being able to find these numbers. But often what you got asked for, like, I want to have this KPI. It's like, yeah, so how are we actually going to measure that at this point? So well-being was one of the ones, like, you hear that come up a lot. We're going to measure well-being. Cool. How? What am I going to look for in this? But let's settle for sick days. By the time you've hit sick days, shit's got real, right? It's way too late. There's no lead indicator on that to kind of play out from it. Okay, let's do those employee engagement ones. And that's when you start to see the regular cycle of quarterlies kicking in. My favorite was when they'd be doing an org change and they put the employee surveys on hold because they knew the results would be shit. And it's like, really? That's not gaming. That quality that you talked about, Rob, of course, that never came into it. I think the problem when you're coming under reports and building is everybody actually has slightly different definitions, though, that what sits behind the KPIs or what those metrics are. Or if they're in certain teams or departments, they're going to have their own code or dialogue that they talk. So, for example, if I'm in the marketing team, I'm going to be talking awareness, consideration, eyeballs, and the finance team are literally rolling their eyes going, yeah, where's the hard sales? Like, that's the bit I actually care about. We spent how much? And if I then see those same finance folks go and engage with designers, they're like, okay, you're doing all this research at this point, but where's the hard impact on the bottom line? And so I think one of the big difficulties you start seeing for these teams that work in disciplines that are not seen as legitimate financial drivers of the business, or questioned at least, because they can't easily tie what they're doing to the financial bottom line, it starts to create real friction that comes into the teams. And almost like a pecking order of finance or CFO, that's number one. This is how we're going to drive the business onto it. Yet over the last 20 years, if we look at it, whether it's Dan Pink, Simon Sinek, Brené Brown and the likes, they're all starting to say, well, your hard number's going to get you so far, but you've actually got to start looking at things you can't easily measure. And I know you've talked on this before, Rob. What's your take on this?
Yeah, so this is probably the question that occupies my mind more than anything else at the moment. Aside from
there's a lot of space up there. There's a lot of vacuum to play with. Yeah,
I was going to say, aside from why is the sky blue? but No, this is the thing that really occupies my time at the moment, and I'm really trying to get my head around it. So I'm not going to claim to have answers here. I'm riding on the coattails of some of the giants that you've mentioned, like Brene Brown and Simon Sinek and folks like that. But there was an old senior manager that I knew who was ribbing the CFO, gently mocking them. When the CFO said something, his response was, "Oh, bloody accountants! The cost of everything and the value of nothing." You know? And he was just having a little joke, but there's real truth in that if you dig a little deeper. And don't get me wrong, I'm not having a go at the finance folks here. I mean that when you're dealing with hard numbers, they will teach you the cost of everything, but the value of nothing in a lot of cases. Now, what I mean by that is, just like your example with sick days, yeah? Sick days will tell you that you've got a problem with well-being, yeah? But they don't tell you anything about how to fix that problem with well-being, yeah? And Simon Sinek and Brené Brown are talking about measuring the stuff that's hard to measure.
Yeah.
But maybe we shouldn't. And I think that what I'll get my head straight on this in just a second. There are about 10,000 thoughts running around there at the moment, and they're all crashing into each other. But the point I'm trying to get to is this: the one time that I saw well-being, for example, managed, the one time that I saw employee opinion survey results go through the roof, the one time I saw people happy in an organization was when we taught everybody how to coach, how to give feedback, how to manage poor performance. And we mandated that you should have at least a monthly one-on-one with each of your team members. So they had the skills to have an empathetic and authentic communication with their teams. And we mandated that they do it at least once a month. Most people broke that mandate and they did it once a week. But once a month was what we stipulated. We made people have conversations. And in having those conversations, we increased trust. We increased well-being. We got a better handle on what the real issues with the organization were, and a better handle from specialists in the organization on how to fix them. So we built trust without ever measuring trust. We built well-being without ever measuring well-being. We realized that in order to build those things, and in fact, maybe we didn't even realize it at the time. Maybe it was just a happy side effect. But we realized that we needed better communication in the organization between leaders and their teams, and that this was likely to have awesome effects. We just didn't realize quite how awesome at the time. So I don't think, with all the best of respect to Brene Brown and Simon Sinek and folks like that, whom I love and will follow, I get that we should measure things. We shouldn't stop measuring things just because they're hard to measure. But there are other things that we shouldn't measure. We should just put the systems and the capability in place to allow them to happen organically, if that doesn't sound like a corporate buzzword.
But if I look at some of the leaders that we've got in place that are perhaps not as confident in the ability to engage with individuals, with people, right? And because you're never quite sure where it's going to go, right, with the conversations. Whereas numbers in front of you in an Excel spreadsheet can feel very confident, very certain, very black and white. And so one of the behaviors that I'd often see for leaders would be they'd say, I'm busy. I'm absolutely flat out. I'm doing but they'd find every reason under the sun not to get in front of their people, right? Despite having the biggest opportunity or impact, as you've described, on performance. And then when I look at the metrics that start to get valued in a busy environment, is they start to become bullshit metrics, where it's like, okay, how many hours have our people logged today? Let's focus on that rather than the outcomes that have been delivered by the team. Let's start to focus very much on what would be some of the other bullshit metrics. I'm just having a blanket on a mind here, Rob. What would be some of the ones you'd have where it's just we're busy, like number of emails, number of calls?
Sure.
Gone in there. It's all volume based rather than the ability to say, did you make a difference? Like my favorite is complaints, where our complaints numbers are down. Oh, fantastic! What's driving that? Oh, we turned them off that were going through last month because they were getting too high across and you literally watch these gaming happen of numbers where the behaviors we end up putting in place really distort those numbers. What's some of the distortion fields or distortion effects you've seen teams do that they should be really mindful of? Because it sends a signal to their teams that it's okay to game the numbers.
Yeah. So I've seen a lot of number gaming. Simon Sinek tells a wonderful story about this, which is that with all the speaking tours that he does, he has frequent flyer points coming out his ass at the moment. And when he hit the highest tier on this particular airline, they gave him a phone number so he could talk to a real live human. And I just thought to myself, well, if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about the way customer experience is going, then there it is. But like you said, people turn off the ability for you to get in contact and then pat themselves on the back because their complaints are down. Yeah. I've seen organizations, I mean, the glorification of busy is a real problem, right? I don't know when that started, but it wasn't that long ago. I've heard other people say, hire lazy people because they will find the quickest way to do something and then sit back with their feet up on a table. But busy's become the standard way now, which is why all of these bullshit metrics are coming into play. But you see people gaming the system all the time. I've seen it with Net Promoter Score, which was supposed to be a wonderful way of us putting a number on a soft interaction, an interpersonal interaction. So I bought a new car, and I had the guy who sold it to me go, and if you wouldn't mind, we're all in a competition to see who gets the best NPS scores. So if you could give me a 10, that'd be great. And I was like, would you like to be more blatant about how you're gaming your customer experience numbers here? I've seen another organization, which shall remain nameless, where just before the customer gets to fill in the NPS score, there's a little banner on the top that says, "You're always a 10 to us." And I was like, oh, come on. So there are always ways of gaming the system. You see it even with employee opinion scores in sort of slightly more toxic relationships where the boss will come and go, hey, there's an employee opinion survey coming through, and if you don't give my manager a 10, well, then we're going to be next in line for a restructure. Where there's fear motivators coming into play again, you know?
I think the gaming also happens at the most senior of levels. Like if I look at how dashboards or reports are actually built and what the KPIs are, and you say, look, we do care, we're a customer-centric firm is one of my favorite ones that gets kind of blasted on the reports. Yet if you look at the front page of any executive report, that will actually tell you what they really care about. That will give you an understanding like, oh, it's all cash that we're talking about pretty much here. Might have our occupational health and safety. Awesome. That's great. But customer well-being all distant memory. You might find it in the appendices some 136 pages later, but it's not what actually gets talked about in the boardroom. And staff see this. They understand this because the analysts that had to build that report, the teams that had to pull those numbers together, the work industry that they get to know which numbers are important and which ones are really they're there for optics as opposed to actually driving behaviors. And this creates, I think, a culture that really starts to become a little bit blasé or a little bit toxic on that. And that's what always surprises me is when that they talk about metrics are the hard numbers. Yet I feel the moment that you walk into a business, you feel it. Exactly if the teams are stressed as F that's going for it. If the place is pumping, it's got a real vibe to it. You feel it when you walk in there. Could I put a number on that? No, I couldn't. But I'd know which company I'd want to work with versus I wouldn't. And I just think that losing sight of hold on, intuition does play a role in here. Numbers are part of the equation. And yes, you do need to know your numbers to be effective, but you've got to actually know your people even more. And I think that's the bit you've been cluing on in this talk today, Rob, has been about empathy and understanding to get to that why. And sort of wrapping up today, what would be your advice you'd like to give to leaders on the journey to building KPIs and driving performance?
Understand that there's a person behind every single one of those metrics. It doesn't matter what you're measuring. I feel for some senior teams in the same way that I feel for the call center reps that we spoke about earlier. They're just trying to produce the numbers that have been handed down from on high. With a lot of senior teams, that's happening with board reports and so on. But understand that there's a person behind every metric that you've got. And the metric might be a way of you going, yeah, that person's okay, or that group of people are okay, or maybe they're not. Yeah. But it's the conversation that allows you to dig down into it. You can't just turn a dial and turn them up or turn them down. So have an empathetic conversation with an individual around that number, or a group of individuals around that number. See what happens. I guarantee the results will be better.
So, Rob, we're now going to wrap up today's session. This one I think we could talk for hours on, because it's something we've both been through hell in a handbasket on and back again. I'm really keen to hear from some of the audience that would come in any of the comments around some of their experience when it comes to KPIs, either the horror stories or, more importantly, what's actually worked for them. That would mean the world to us. The takeaway I think that I'm taking out of this day is, if you want to build better KPIs, you need to start by practicing that give a damn empathy for not just your team, but also your colleagues around you, to understand their worlds and their reality. And the only way you're going to do that is you actually need to hang out with them. So grab a cuppa, go sit down with them and learn their worlds. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, which should be floating around the screen somewhere about now. Check out our podcast, and which is on Substack. There's a QR code that's at the end. Take care, folks. And is Rob going to say, catch you next time? Or?
Sure. Catch you next time.